For millions of us, the opening notes of the Little House on the Prairie theme song aren't just music. They're a time machine. They send us hurtling back to what felt like a simpler, more wholesome time. A world of sunbonnets, wagon wheels, and the unshakable warmth of family. At the absolute heart of that world were Charles and Caroline Ingalls and Ma, the moral compass for a whole generation of TV viewers. Their on-screen chemistry, played with such believable tenderness by Michael Landon and Karen Grassle, was the bedrock of the show. He was the principled, hard-working dad. She was the gentle, resilient mom, the steady hand that guided their family through every disaster. Their love story felt real, their family felt like our family, and for 9 seasons, we all wanted to believe in the idyllic world they built in Walnut Grove. But what if that perfect picture was just a carefully constructed lie? What if the man who embodied America's favorite TV dad was actually the source of deep and lasting pain for the woman playing his wife? For decades, Karen Grassle, the actress who gave Ma Ingalls her quiet strength, kept a painful secret. She smiled for the cameras, signed the autographs, and protected the show's family-friendly legacy, all while carrying the weight of what she went through when the cameras stopped rolling. Now, at 82, she's done with the silence. In her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, Karen Grassle is finally revealing the dark reality of working with Michael Landon, and her story is shattering the pristine image of Little House on the Prairie forever. This isn't just some story about a disagreement between this is about power, humiliation, and a resilience that nobody saw for far too long. Picture it, a cozy cabin bedroom, lit by a flickering lamp. Ma and Pa Ingalls are in bed, the day's worries on their faces, but their voices are soft with love and support. These were the moments that made Little House on the Prairie what it was. The quiet talks, the shared looks, the unbreakable partnership that could handle any storm. It was this chemistry that made us believe in the Ingalls family, and it was this image of pure goodness that made Michael Landon a household god. He wasn't just an actor playing a part, he was Pa Ingalls, a symbol of integrity, decency, and fatherly love. But for Karen Grassle, lying in that bed under hot studio lights, surrounded by a nearly all-male crew, these tender scenes often became a source of dread. Because as soon as the director yelled cut, the man she knew as her kind, sensitive on-screen husband would disappear. In his place, she says, was a man who would tell filthy, demeaning jokes about female anatomy jokes that left her feeling trapped, exposed, and totally powerless. She describes herself as being frozen, a trained professional and a feminist who felt she had no choice but to silently put up with the crude humor. This was the awful paradox she lived with, playing America's most respected wife and mother, while feeling disrespected as a woman and an artist. The beloved world of Walnut Grove was, for her, often a deeply lonely and hostile place of truth she kept, buried for nearly 40 years. To really get how this could happen on the set of such a wholesome show, you have to understand the incredible power Michael Landon had. He wasn't just the star of Little House on the Prairie. He was its creator, executive producer, a frequent writer, and its go-to director. In 1970s television, having one person hold all those jobs was almost unheard of. The show was his vision, his kingdom, and on that set, his word was law. Landon was already a massive star from his 14 seasons as Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza. When that show ended, NBC was desperate to keep their golden boy. They offered him a new deal, and he chose to adapt Laura Ingalls Wilder's classic books, but only on his terms. He would play Charles Ingalls, and he would control every single aspect of the show. This gave him an almost mythical status on set. Everyone who worked there said he was a force of nature, a workhorse with a hand in everything. He was famous for his insane work ethic, fueled by cigarettes and a relentless drive for perfection. He was also known for being a charmer who could make the crew laugh, keeping spirits high and the production moving. He was the sun, and the entire Little House universe revolved around him. For a young actress like Karen Grassle, this was all pretty intimidating. She was a classically trained theater actress from UC Berkeley and a Fulbright scholar who studied in London. She'd been on Broadway. She was serious about her craft. When she first auditioned, she found Landon to be incredibly kind, even getting on the floor with her to read lines. He was the one who championed her for the part of Caroline, choosing her over 47 other actresses. In those early days, she felt like they were true partners, but she quickly learned that partnership had its limits. The power dynamic was crystal clear. Michael was the boss. Allison Arngrim, who played the wonderfully bratty Nellie Allison, called Landon both marvelous and crazy, a chain-smoking Ferrari-driving workaholic who was the complete opposite of humble Pa Ingalls. She confirmed the set often felt like an old boys club, where Landon's word was final and his behavior went completely unchecked. This was the world Karen Grassle walked into, a world where one man held all the cards, and questioning him meant risking your entire career. That perfect partnership between Ma and Pa Ingalls, it fractured after the very first season. Little House on the Prairie was a smash hit right out of the gate, climbing into the top 10 for actors on a hit show. That usually means one thing: it's time to renegotiate your contract. As the female lead, Karen Grassle reasonably believed she deserved a raise that reflected the show's huge success. She wasn't asking to get rich, she was just asking for a fair wage. She was not prepared for the pushback she got not from the network, but from her co-star and boss. According to Grassle, when she asked Landon for a raise, he shut her down completely. He argued that her salary should be closer to what the child actors were making. Then, to twist the knife, he told her she wasn't even the audience's favorite character. He claimed NBC had run tests that proved Ma Ingalls was one of the least popular figures on the show, so she didn't deserve a pay bump. For Grassle, this wasn't just business. It felt deeply personal. As she wrote, "I felt insulted. As his co-star on a hit series, I didn't want to gouge anybody, but I expected a fair wage." The dispute created a nasty tension on set. While her agent fought the network, Grassle had to keep working alongside the very man who was trying to convince everyone she wasn't valuable. She says Landon's once warm personality turned to ice. The friendly collaborator was gone, replaced by a boss who seemed to resent her for daring to ask for what she was worth. The conflict wasn't just emotional. She says it started to bleed into the scripts. As the contract battle raged, Grassle noticed her character, Caroline, started to get less and less screen time. Her lines were cut, her role in the family story shrinking. She had specifically asked in her contract for at least 2 episodes a season to focus on Ma's storyline. Instead, she watched as her character was sidelined. She called it the transformation of Ma Ingalls into the incredible shrinking woman. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a power play, a clear message from the man in charge. Cross me, and you'll regret it. The hero that millions adored on screen had, in her experience, become a boss who used his creative control as a weapon. Eventually, Grassle did get her raise, but the damage was done. The trust was gone, and a toxic new dynamic had set in. The man who played her loving husband now felt like her enemy. This story reveals a side of a TV classic most of us never knew. It's a powerful reminder that the images we see on screen can hide some complicated and painful truths. If you think this story is as shocking and important as we do, and you believe in the courage it takes to speak out, take a second to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We're dedicated to bringing you the untold stories behind the stars you thought you knew. The fallout from the contract dispute didn't stop at cutting her screen time. According to Karen Grassle, Michael Landon's behavior spiraled into a pattern of personal and public humiliation. That old boys' club atmosphere on set became especially toxic for her. Landon's on-set humor, once used to boost morale, was now her. She writes in her memoir that Landon started making cruel jokes at her expense, often about her body or her opinions. These weren't playful jabs between friends. They were mean-spirited comments made in front of the whole cast and crew, who would often laugh along, leaving Grassle feeling completely alone. And who could she complain to? In 1970s Hollywood, there was no HR department. Speaking out against the show's powerful star and producer would have been career suicide. She was trapped. But the worst of it, she says, happened during the filming of their most intimate scenes. As Ma and Pa, they were often filmed in bed, sharing those tender conversations that were a trademark of the show. Those scenes required trust. But for Grassle, they became terrifying. She describes lying in that small bed, under the hot lights, surrounded by a male crew, feeling physically trapped. It was in those moments, she alleges, that Landon's humor would turn disgusting. He would make filthy jokes about women's bodies, and how a woman smelled after sex, using crude language that left her speechless. In one interview, she recalled the experience vividly. "I was raised to be a good girl, you know, rise above, look the other way, don't react. And I just sat there, frozen. Just frozen. And then we would shoot the scene." The emotional whiplash is hard to even imagine, going from enduring offensive, sexist remarks to immediately having to play a scene of deep marital love. It was a painful split between the wholesome fiction she was paid to create and the demeaning reality she was forced to live. She felt this behavior was direct payback for challenging him over her salary. It was his way of reminding her who was in charge. While the world saw Michael Landon as the perfect husband, she was experiencing a side of him that was bullying and misogynistic. The man who championed family values on screen was, in her eyes, creating a hostile work environment where she was the #1 target. After 8 seasons, Karen Grassle's time on Little House on the Prairie was over. When she gave her notice, the show's dynamic was already changing. The kids were growing up, and the story was shifting. But for Grassle, leaving was also personal. She was worn down. She said even the final wrap party felt like a sad affair, and she felt alienated from the cast she'd worked with for nearly a decade. After leaving Walnut Grove, she returned to her first love, the theater. She founded her own theater company, appeared on Broadway, and acted across the country. But for decades, a big question hung in the air. Why did she stay silent about Michael Landon for so long? Well, the answer isn't simple. First, the fear of being blacklisted was very real. In that era, you just didn't speak out against a giant like Michael Landon. It would have been career suicide, as she explained. As a woman in the 1970s film industry, I was so accustomed to these it never occurred to me to sharply rebuke him. There was a culture of silence. Second, there was the massive pressure of the show's wholesome image. Little House was more than a TV show. It was a cultural symbol of decency and family. To reveal that its creator behaved this way would have been devastating to millions of fans. Grassle knew that, and for years, she chose to protect the legacy of P.A. Ingalls over telling her own truth. Finally, her silence was tied to her own personal struggles. In her memoir, Grassle is brutally honest about her battle with alcoholism. During her time on the show, born to an alcoholic father, she found herself trapped in the same cycle. That turmoil, mixed with the stress at work, made it even harder to confront the problems on set. But she eventually got sober, and that journey gave her the clarity and strength to look back and reevaluate everything. For years, she just tried to move on. But eventually, she realized the only way to truly heal was to reclaim her story. So, why now? Why, at 82, did Karen Grassle finally decide to break a 4-decade silence? The answer isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation. With the perspective of time, and inspired by the courage of the women in the #MeToo movement, she felt it was finally time to tell her story. In her own words, she realized that the negative environment Landon created was a form of harassment, and that her experience was part of a much bigger problem. Writing her book was her chance to set the record straight, not just about the pain, but about her own strength. Her story, however, has one last, poignant chapter. Years after the show ended, and not long before Michael Landon's tragic death from cancer in 1991, the two of them reconciled. Grassle reached out to Landon, and he responded warmly. They had a long, friendly phone conversation. They didn't rehash old fights or dwell on past hurts. Instead, they just talked about their families and the good old days. For Grassle, that final call meant everything. She said how grateful she is that they were able to mend fences. It brought her a sense of peace and closure. This doesn't excuse the behavior she endured, but it does paint a more complete picture of a very complicated man. Michael Landon wasn't a simple villain. He was a brilliant but deeply flawed person, a man who could create incredible joy for millions while causing deep pain to those closest to him. The legacy of Little House on the Prairie is still intact. The show's powerful messages still resonate. But Karen Grassle's story adds a vital layer of truth. It's a difficult and inspiring truth that reminds us that Caroline Ingalls, the quiet, resilient heart of the family, was played by a woman of even greater strength, a woman who fought her own silent battles, navigated a toxic workplace, and found the courage to finally tell her side of the story. The story of Karen Grassle and Michael Landon is a powerful, unsettling look behind the curtain of one of TV's most beloved shows. It forces us to see our heroes as the complex, flawed human beings they really are. For decades, the narrative of Little House was written and controlled by one man. Now, the woman who played Ma Ingalls has finally added her own essential chapter. Revelations don't paint a picture of victimhood, they paint a picture of incredible resilience. It's the story of a classically trained actress who stood her ground, a woman who battled her personal demons and won, and an artist who survived a hostile environment with her integrity intact. Her ability to find peace and reconcile with Landon before he died speaks volumes about her character. Karen Grassle's courage doesn't diminish the magic of Little House on the Prairie. If anything, it enriches it, adding a layer of hard-won reality. It reminds us that the woman who so perfectly embodied the strength of a pioneer mother possessed an even deeper well of that strength in her own life. She has finally stepped out of the shadow of the Little House, not to tear it down, but to make sure the full story of what it took to build it is finally told. Thank you for joining us for this look into the untold story behind Little House on the Prairie. What do you think about Karen Grassle's revelations? Does it change how you see the show or Michael Landon? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you believe these hidden histories need to be told, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that challenge what you thought you knew. We'll see you next time.